What is your view about the payment of reparations to black people as a result of slavery?
Well, first of all, with regard to payments with reparations issue, I personally think that slave owners should make payments to slaves for the injustices. But we're going to have to take care of that business somewhere else, either in heaven or hell. Now, there is no way that a white person living today has any obligation for slavery. No responsibility for slavery. And what people are many people with this reparations business, they're saying that essentially that a white of today should compensate a black of today for what a white of yesterday did to a black of yesterday. Now, to me, that does not make sense. Now, same way, that is, if an Indian came to my house saying, "Walter, I want you to compensate me," I would go get my gun. Not because I have anything against Indians, but I just don't want foolish people knocking on my door.
Walter E. Williams was an American economist, commentator, and academic. Mr. Williams is a distinguished professor of economics of George Mason University and was also a syndicated columnist and author born in Philadelphia, PA in 1936. He grew up in the Richard Allen housing projects. He graduated from Benjamin Franklin High School. He then moved to LA to live with his father and attended LA City College for 1 year, dropped out, and got a job as a cab driver back in Philly. He was then drafted into the U.S. military and served as a private in the U.S. Army. After the military, Mr. Williams resumed his education at Cal State, LA, earning his master's and his PhD from UCLA. While attending UCLA, he met Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell had arrived as a visiting professor. The two met and created a friendship that lasted decades until his recent death in December 2020. As an economist, Mr. Williams was a proponent of free market economics and opposed socialist systems of government intervention. While at UCLA and in his teachings, he also used to say this: capitalism is the most moral and most productive system humans have ever devised. I agree, Mr. Williams. Let's hear him out and see Mr. Williams in action. Editor, roll the clip. Fair use.
My name is Dr. Walter Williams, and I'm an economist. I have spent much of my life studying the causes of poverty. I broke out of the North Philadelphia ghetto nearly 30 years ago, and so did most of my friends. But today, fewer young blacks are escaping places like this. I want to spend the next 30 minutes exploring the reasons why. For believe it or not, to a considerable extent, the government is the culprit. It is the government with its hundreds of billions of dollars. It is the government with its thousands of programs. It is the government with its endless good intentions. This is the first place I ever did that. Benjamin Franklin High School in North Philly. Franklin was mostly black when I was a student here in 1954. It has always had its problems financially and academically. But I got a solid education here, and so did my classmates. Most of my classmates read at or above grade level. They came to school, they did their homework, and they behaved. But as in most schools all over America, things at Franklin got worse in the 60s and 70s.
Where the illegitimacy rate in the United States among blacks is roughly around 55%. That is, nationally, 55% of all black babies are born out of wedlock. And in some cities like New York and Chicago, you might find 80 or 90%, New York and Washington, D.C. rather. Now, the illegitimacy rate among blacks is a new phenomenon in black history in the United States. That is, in 1940, the illegitimacy rate among blacks was about 12%. In 1918,
The illegitimacy rate among black teenagers was less than that among white teenagers. So how do you explain the increase in illegitimacy or out-of-wedlock marriages or slovenliness in general? Well, I mean, I think any economist would tell you that if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. And if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it, whether it's wheat, cheese, or slovenly behavior. And indeed, United States, we have been subsidizing slovenly behavior. That is, we have been making the cost of illegitimacy or having kids out of wedlock relatively cheap. That is, through welfare payments, through other kinds of in-kind.
Well, I think that in the case of Japanese Americans, for example, who were interned during the Second World War, well, those are a current generation of people who were abused by a living generation of people. Now, I think that there should be some compensation. But however, I have problems with that because they're compensating them with my tax dollars. See, I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't have anything to do with getting the Japanese intern. So I don't feel any obligation whatsoever.
The First Amendment says we have freedom of speech. Now, that became part of our Constitution in the 1790s. Is there anything that has changed today whereby we say, oh no, the freedom of speech, that's something old-fashioned. You're going to have regulated speech. Well, no, freedom of speech is an essential human right.
Here is the minimum wage law.
The minimum wage law is telling our young people that if they can't produce $3.35 an hour of goods or services, then they are not worthy of a job at all. This is so because the minimum wage law requires every employer to pay a worker at least $3.35 an hour, no matter how unskilled that worker may be. However, the businessman has to look at more than that $3.35 an hour. He also has to pay Social Security, unemployment compensation, and fringes such as insurance. So the actual cost to the employer is around $4 an hour, even for the lowest skilled worker. You and I, as Americans, we need to ask the question, is there a moral basis for taking the property of one person and giving it to another to whom it does not belong? Now, it turns out that that is 3/4, or at least 2/3, of what the federal government spends money for. That is, if you look at the expenditures of our government, most of them consist of nothing more than legalized theft. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, Williams, you know, all these things you disagree with, they are a result of the fact that we have a democracy and it's majority rule. Well, first of all, I try to tell the person, well, the framers did not intend for it to be a democracy. It was to be a republic.
We often hear the claim that our nation is a democracy. That wasn't the vision of the founders. They saw democracy as another form of tyranny. If we've become a democracy, I guarantee you that the founders would be deeply disappointed by our betrayal of their vision.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. If you read the statements by Madison, Jefferson, and Adams, they condemn the idea of democracy. Matter of fact, you don't find the term democracy in any of our founding documents. That is, you don't find the word democracy in the Declaration of Independence. You don't find the word democracy anywhere in the United States Constitution. And if the listeners want further convincing of this, when we talk about when we pledge allegiance to the flag, is it to the democracy for which it stands or the republic? Then something that people don't understand is the Second Amendment. Now, too many Americans think that the framers gave us the Second Amendment so that we can go deer and duck hunting. That's not true at all. They actually say that they're giving us the Second Amendment so that we have some power to protect ourselves against the central government, namely the Constitution and the Congress of the United States.
My number 8, thank you, God, for bringing Walter E. Williams and all his gems, his knowledge, available to all of us. Full salute, sir. R.I.P. Your legacy will continue. Thank you. Guys, stay tuned for my number 9, and thanks for the support. Stay free.